The rancher gave water to 3 Apache widows, and the next day, 25 women surrounded him. John Harper was a man who had lived all his life in the wide, open lands of Arizona. He was a rancher by choice and by necessity. His ranch was not large, but it was enough for him to take care of his cattle, grow a small garden, and live a peaceful life far from the noise of towns and cities. The sun rose early each day, painting the sky with colors that changed from soft pinks to blazing oranges. John loved mornings the most. There was something comforting in the quiet moments before the world woke up, the gentle lowing of his cattle, and the smell of fresh earth after a light morning breeze swept through the ranch. John was a tall man with weathered hands and a calm face that carried the marks of years spent outdoors. Life on the ranch had taught him patience and endurance. Every day he had to wake before dawn to feed the animals, check the fences, and make sure the water troughs were full. In the summer, the sun could be cruel, turning the ground dry and cracked, and the cattle often needed extra care. Still, John never complained. To him, the work was part of life, a rhythm that made him feel alive. One particularly hot afternoon, John was walking along one of the dry trails near the edge of his ranch. The sun beat down relentlessly, and he could feel sweat soaking through his shirt. The land around him was rugged and quiet, with only the sound of the wind whispering through the sparse trees and the occasional call of a bird high above. As he made his way to the water trough at the far end of the ranch, he noticed something unusual, a figure moving slowly across the dusty ground. At first, he thought it might be one of the local townspeople, or perhaps someone lost in the heat. But as the figure drew closer, he realized there were not one but 3 women. They were walking together, their steps careful and measured. Their clothes were simple and worn, and their faces showed exhaustion and worry. John noticed that their eyes seemed dry and tired, and their mouths moved silently, speaking words he could not hear from where he stood. Without a second thought, he set down the bucket he had been carrying and called out to them. "Hello there, are you all right? You look like you could use some water." The women stopped and looked toward him. There was a moment of hesitation. They had probably been traveling for some time, and the appearance of a man on a ranch might have startled them. Still, after a few quiet seconds, one of them nodded slowly. She stepped forward, her movements careful, and gestured toward the water trough. John quickly moved to fill it, letting the cool water flow freely. He then offered them fresh bread from a small basket he kept in his shed. The 3 women approached cautiously. Their faces were a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. John smiled gently and said, "It's hot out today. You must be tired and thirsty. Please take as much water as you need." One of the women, who seemed to be the eldest, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. "Thank you, sir," she said. "It has been many days since we had something to drink." John felt a warmth in his heart. He had always believed in helping others whenever he could. To him, this was not a heroic act, it was simply doing the right thing. He offered them water again and made sure each woman could drink comfortably. He watched as the youngest of the 3 sipped carefully, her hands shaking slightly as she held the cup. There was a silence that was both peaceful and meaningful, a silence that spoke of hardship, survival, and the simple kindness of strangers. After a while, John decided to sit down with them. He asked their names, though he knew little of their lives yet. They introduced themselves slowly, each word deliberate and thoughtful. John learned that they were from a nearby Apache community, and that life had not been easy for them, especially in recent months. Their husbands had passed away, leaving them to manage on their own. They had come seeking work, food, or help from anyone who would offer it. John listened quietly, nodding and showing understanding. He did not interrupt or judge. He simply offered his attention, which was sometimes more valuable than food or water. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John realized he could not keep them long, for he had chores and cattle to attend to. but he wanted to leave them with a feeling of safety. He offered them more water, told them to rest in the shade of a nearby tree, and promised that they could return any time for assistance. The women expressed their gratitude again, bowing their heads in a way that conveyed respect and appreciation. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. When the three women finally stood to leave, he walked with them to the edge of the ranch. He gave each a small piece of bread to take with them, just in case their journey was long. "Remember," he said, "you can come back any time. You don't have to be afraid here." The women nodded, their eyes glistening slightly. Without another word, they slowly walked away, disappearing into the dusty horizon, their figures growing smaller with each step. John watched them until they vanished from sight. Then he returned to his chores, feeling a strange mix of happiness and curiosity. Who were they? What would their lives be like? He could not have known then how this simple act of giving water and bread would ripple outward in ways he never imagined. For John, that afternoon was a reminder that life was about small acts of kindness, about reaching out to others when they needed help most, and about seeing humanity in every person who crossed his path. The day continued, with John tending to the cattle and checking fences, but there was a lightness in his step. The land seemed warmer, the air seemed fresher, and even the sun felt less harsh. Something in him had changed, though he could not yet name it. He had discovered the power of compassion, the quiet strength of helping someone without expecting anything in return. And though the three women were now gone, their presence lingered in his mind like a gentle memory, reminding him that the world was full of people in need, and that even one act of kindness could make a difference. As the evening approached, John sat on the porch of his small ranch house, watching the sky turn shades of pink and purple. He thought about the women, their tired faces, their silent strength, and the courage it must have taken for them to travel alone. He made a quiet promise to himself. Whenever someone was in need, he would help. He did not know what the future held, but he knew that simple acts, offering water, sharing food, or listening patiently, were the foundations of a life well lived. That night, as he lay down to sleep, the memory of their grateful eyes stayed with him. He fell asleep with a sense of peace, unaware that the next day would bring even more unexpected visitors and lessons about kindness, trust, and the ripple effect of one small gesture. The morning after John Harper had offered water and bread to the three Apache women, he awoke, with the sun already spilling golden light across the ranch. The air was warmer than the day before, carrying the soft scent of dry earth and wild grass. John yawned, stretched his arms, and stepped outside, ready to begin his morning chores. He had always found comfort in routine, the quiet rhythm of life on a ranch. But that morning, there was a strange sense of anticipation in the air, a feeling that today would not be like any other. John first checked the cattle, making sure they had enough water and that none had wandered too far from the corral. He moved along the fences, inspecting them for damage from recent winds, and mended the loose boards he found. The land seemed calm, almost serene, and for a while it felt as if he were alone with his animals and the endless stretch of the desert. But then, as he turned the corner near the main gate, he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. There, on the dusty path leading toward the ranch, was not just a few travelers, but a group of women. They were moving carefully, almost in a line, and John could count at least 25 of them. They were not loud, but their presence was unmistakable. Each woman carried a small bundle of belongings, their faces showing signs of both caution and curiosity. John's heart quickened. He had never seen anything like this before. He wondered if there had been a problem somewhere in the nearby town, or if a family needed urgent help. Yet, deep down, he felt it might be connected to the three women he had helped the day before. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, raising his hand in a friendly greeting. "Good morning. Welcome. You can come closer if you like." For a few moments the women hesitated, exchanging quiet words among themselves. Their eyes scanned the ranch, the fences, and John himself. Some looked nervous, while others seemed curious and even hopeful. Finally, the eldest among them nodded slightly, and the group began moving closer, keeping a respectful distance. John realized that he needed to put them at ease. He walked toward the water trough, filled it generously, and set out a few baskets of fresh bread and fruit he had prepared earlier. "Please," he said warmly, "help yourselves. There is enough for all of you." The women stopped, looking at him in surprise. It seemed they had not expected such hospitality from a stranger. Slowly, they began to take the water and food, offering soft murmurs of thanks in return. As they drank and ate, John walked among them, asking their names and gently inquiring about their needs. Some were hesitant to speak, unsure whether they could trust him. Others began to share their stories, one by one. He learned that they, too, were widows, like the three women from yesterday. Many had faced hardships, losing loved ones and struggling to care for themselves and their families. Life had been difficult, and they had often gone days without enough food or water. Now, finding a safe place and someone willing to help felt almost like a miracle. John listened patiently. He did not interrupt or offer empty promises. Instead, he gave them his attention, asked questions with genuine interest, and made small gestures to show his concern. He fetched extra blankets for those who seemed cold despite the sun's warmth, and helped carry some of the heavier bundles. As he worked, he realized that the simple act of listening was just as important as the water and bread he had provided. These women needed someone to hear them, someone who treated them as human beings worthy of care and respect. By mid-morning, the atmosphere began to change. What had started as cautious hesitation turned into quiet conversation. The women shared stories about their families, the lands they had once lived on, and the struggles they had endured since losing their husbands. Some spoke of small joys they remembered from better times, the laughter of children, or the taste of fresh food cooked over an open fire. John found himself deeply moved by their resilience. Despite everything they had been through, they carried hope in their hearts, and that hope seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment at the ranch. The group spent hours talking and resting under the shade of the large trees near the water trough. John continued his work on the ranch, checking the fences and feeding the animals, but he kept one eye on the women, making sure they were comfortable. He also noticed that some of them began helping each other, passing food, sharing water, and offering support to those who appeared weaker or more tired. It was a quiet, unspoken cooperation, a natural bond forming between strangers who shared a common struggle. As the day went on, John began to understand that this visit was not a coincidence. His small act of kindness the day before had created a ripple effect. Word of his generosity had traveled quickly through the local community, reaching people who had needed help for a long time. These women had come not only for water and food, but also for safety and a sense of trust in a world that often treated them unfairly. John realized that he was now part of something bigger than himself, something that involved responsibility, care, and compassion on a larger scale. By afternoon, the sun was high and scorching. The women had found places to rest, and some even helped him with minor chores on the ranch. Together, they carried water to the animals, cleaned small areas near the house, and gathered firewood. John appreciated their efforts, but he also understood that he had to be careful not to overwhelm them. He spoke kindly, encouraging them to rest when they needed and reminding them that there was no rush. The ranch had become a safe haven, a place where work and rest coexisted, and where trust could be built slowly. As evening approached, John gathered the women under the largest tree near the water trough. He shared more bread and warm tea he had prepared, and they sat together, watching the sun slowly descend behind the distant mountains. Shadows stretched long across the dusty ground, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wild sage and desert flowers. For the first time that day, there was laughter. Small jokes were exchanged, and stories of past adventures and childhood memories were shared. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What had started as a simple act of offering water had now become a connection between people, a bond that transcended language, culture, and distance. Before the women prepared to leave, John spoke to them softly. "You are welcome here any time. You do not need to be afraid. If you ever need help, my ranch is open to you." The women nodded, their faces filled with gratitude and a sense of safety. Some clasped his hands briefly, others touched the water trough as if acknowledging the kindness it represented. John watched them walk away, feeling both joy and anticipation. He knew that their visit would not be the last, and he also understood that he had become part of a network of trust and friendship that would continue to grow. That night, John sat alone on the porch of his small ranch house, reflecting on the events of the day. The sky was painted with brilliant shades of pink, purple, and gold. The air was cooler now, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional cry of a night bird. John felt a sense of calm and purpose unlike anything he had experienced before. He realized that life on the ranch was no longer just about cattle, fences, and chores. It was about people, about connections, and about the power of one simple gesture to change the course of many lives. As he prepared for bed, John thought about the women, their courage, their struggles, and their hope. He understood that his life had subtly shifted. The ranch was no longer just his home. It was a place where kindness could thrive, where trust could be built, and where people could find a small measure of comfort in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. He went to sleep that night with a quiet sense of satisfaction, unaware that the simple act of offering water and bread to strangers had already begun a story that would grow far beyond the limits of his ranch and his imagination. The following morning, John Harper woke up to the soft, golden light of dawn spilling across the wide plains surrounding his ranch. The wind was gentle, carrying with it the scent of the desert and the faint fragrance of wildflowers that had survived the summer heat. John took a deep breath, feeling the calmness of the early hours, but his mind was already on the events of the previous day. The visit from the 25 women had changed the rhythm of his life in ways he hadn't yet fully understood. He knew that he wanted to help them, to do more than just give water and food, but he also understood that trust had to be built slowly and carefully. After tending to his cattle and checking the fences, John made his way to the water trough, wondering if any of the women would return today. He had learned from the day before that acts of kindness could create connections that went beyond words. As he approached, he saw a few familiar faces in the distance. Some of the women had indeed come back, along with a few others he did not recognize. They carried small baskets and bundles, and their expressions showed both hope and cautious excitement. John smiled warmly, waving to them. "Good morning, please come closer, there's plenty for everyone." The women approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance at first. John noticed that some of them were hesitant, as though unsure whether they could trust a stranger so completely. He understood their caution. The world had not always been kind to them, and they had learned to be careful. But as they drew nearer, he saw curiosity and relief in their eyes, and he knew that their journey to his ranch was not just about food and water. It was about hope, safety, and connection. John began by offering water and bread, just as he had the day before. The women accepted gratefully, and some even began to speak more freely. John listened patiently, encouraging them to share their stories at their own pace. He learned about their struggles, widowed too young, left to fend for themselves and their children, and the daily challenges of survival in a harsh and sometimes unforgiving environment. Some spoke of the pain of losing loved ones, while others spoke of small joys they still held onto, like memories of laughter and family traditions. John felt a deep empathy for each woman, and he silently vowed to do whatever he could to help them feel safe and supported. As the morning passed, John realized that his role was becoming more than just a provider of food and water. He was now a listener, a teacher, and a friend. Some of the women needed guidance on tending to small chores around the ranch, while others simply needed someone to hear them, to acknowledge their struggles and validate their experiences. John worked alongside them, showing patience and respect. He explained how to carry water efficiently, how to mend fences, and how to care for the animals. In return, the women helped each other and began assisting with small tasks, creating a sense of teamwork that John found both heartwarming and inspiring. By late morning, a few of the women had begun to open up even more. They shared stories of their lives before tragedy had struck, their childhoods, their families, and the communities they had been part of. Some of them had skills in weaving, cooking, or gardening, and John encouraged them to share these skills among themselves. Slowly, the ranch transformed from a simple place of work into a small community where learning, cooperation, and mutual support flourished. John observed the interactions carefully, realizing that these women were not just seeking help. They were seeking connection, trust, and a sense of belonging. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John suggested a break. He led the women to the shade of a large mesquite tree near the water trough and set out additional bread and fresh fruit he had saved. They sat together quietly at first, enjoying the food and the cool shade. Then one of the younger women began to tell a story about her childhood, her voice soft but animated. Gradually, the others joined in, sharing tales of past celebrations, small victories, and moments of joy that had sustained them through difficult times. Laughter echoed across the ranch, a sound that had been missing for far too long in their lives. John watched with a sense of wonder. He had never imagined that his simple act of kindness, offering water and bread, could grow into something so meaningful. The women were forming bonds with each other, and they were beginning to see the ranch as a place of safety and possibility. John realized that helping people was not just about providing material support. It was about creating an environment where trust, respect, and understanding could flourish. Every smile, every shared story, every gesture of cooperation strengthened these connections, and John felt privileged to witness it. As afternoon approached, John suggested that they take a walk around the ranch. He wanted to show them the land he cared for so deeply, and he hoped that being in nature would bring them a sense of peace. The women agreed, and together they moved through the dusty paths, past the cattle grazing lazily, and toward the small garden where John grew vegetables. He explained how he tended to the plants, how he conserved water, and how he ensured that every part of the ranch contributed to the well-being of both the animals and the people who lived there. The women listened intently, asking questions and offering their own ideas. During the walk, John noticed how some of the women began to take on small responsibilities naturally. One helped carry water to the animals, another swept the dusty paths, and a few began to tend to the garden. It was clear that they were gaining confidence in their abilities, and John felt a sense of pride in their progress. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about empowerment, about teaching skills that could give them independence and strength. He encouraged them gently, praising their efforts and showing patience when mistakes were made. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a soft shade of orange, and a cool breeze swept across the ranch. John and the women returned to the large tree near the water trough, where they shared a simple meal of bread, fruit, and warm tea. Conversation flowed easily now, and John realized that a genuine bond was forming. The women laughed together, shared advice, and supported each other in ways that were both practical and emotional. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had always believed in helping others, but he had never experienced the depth of connection and gratitude that he felt now. As evening approached, The women prepared to leave, but this time there was a sense of anticipation. They did not simply accept John's generosity. They offered to return and help with chores, to share their skills, and to support each other. John was touched by their willingness to contribute, recognizing that true kindness was reciprocal, built on mutual respect and care. He promised that they could return anytime, and he assured them that the ranch would always be a place of safety and support. The women left with smiles on their faces, their steps lighter than when they had arrived, and John watched them go with a mixture of joy and quiet awe. That night, John sat on the porch, gazing at the stars that spread like a blanket across the desert sky. He reflected on the day's events, realizing that his life had changed in ways he could not have predicted. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a haven, a place where hope, trust, and compassion could thrive. He thought about the women, their courage, their struggles, and their resilience, and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to make a difference in their lives. John knew that this was only the beginning. The women would return, and others would hear of the kindness that had been shown to them. He understood that his actions could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could not yet see. But he also knew that he had found a purpose beyond tending cattle and maintaining fences. His life had gained a new meaning: to help, to listen, to teach, and to create a community where trust and kindness could flourish. As he prepared for sleep, John felt a quiet sense of contentment. The sun had set, painting the sky with brilliant hues of pink and gold, and the ranch was bathed in a peaceful calm. The memory of the women's grateful faces, their laughter, and the stories they had shared filled his heart. He understood that the world could be a harsh place, but it could also be beautiful, especially when people reached out to help one another. That night, John Harper fell asleep with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that tomorrow would bring more opportunities to make a difference, and that his small acts of kindness could continue to grow into something truly extraordinary. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to John Harper's ranch. What had once been a quiet, solitary life of tending cattle and maintaining fences transformed into a lively routine filled with visitors, conversations, and shared work. The women who had come seeking help returned regularly, and more began to hear about the kindness and safety offered at John's ranch. By now, John realized that his small act of giving water and bread to 3 strangers had grown into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Every morning, John rose with the sun, carrying water to the trough and preparing simple meals for the women. They arrived in small groups, sometimes singly, and often stayed for hours, helping with chores and sharing their stories. John had learned to anticipate their needs, making sure there was enough food, shade, and water for everyone. He also encouraged them to help each other, fostering a sense of community and cooperation. Slowly, the women began to form friendships among themselves, supporting one another and exchanging skills. Some shared knowledge about gardening, weaving, and cooking, while others offered guidance on caring for animals or maintaining the ranch. John watched this transformation with a sense of awe. He had expected to offer simple kindness, but he was now witnessing the creation of a small but vibrant community. The women, who had once been strangers and skeptics, were becoming partners in building a safe and productive space. He noticed how they organized themselves naturally, assigning tasks according to each person's strengths. Some took responsibility for feeding the animals, others worked on the garden, and a few tended to minor repairs around the house. Each woman contributed in her own way, and John encouraged their efforts, praising them when deserved and offering gentle guidance when mistakes were made. Word of John's generosity spread quickly, reaching nearby towns and communities. People began to visit the ranch, some seeking work, others seeking advice or simply a place where they could be heard. John welcomed them all, though he maintained a careful balance, ensuring that the ranch did not become overcrowded. Over time, the ranch became a hub of learning and support, where people could come not only for practical assistance, but also for emotional encouragement. John's simple principle, treat everyone with respect and kindness, became the foundation of this growing community. One afternoon, as John worked alongside the women to repair a section of fence, he noticed a change in their demeanor. Where they had once been cautious and reserved, there was now confidence and pride in their movements. They asked questions, suggested improvements, and even taught each other new techniques. John felt a deep satisfaction, realizing that the women were not merely receiving help, they were growing stronger and more capable with each passing day. Their independence and self-reliance were blossoming, nurtured by a combination of guidance, encouragement, and mutual support. The ranch also became a place of learning for John. He discovered that the women carried knowledge and skills he had never encountered before. One woman taught him how to identify medicinal plants in the desert. Another showed him weaving techniques that could be used to make baskets or simple tools. And yet another shared tips on conserving water and growing vegetables in arid soil. John embraced these lessons with humility, recognizing that help was not one way. The women were not only recipients of his kindness, they were teachers, friends, and partners in building a better life on the ranch. As weeks passed, the sense of community deepened. The women began to support each other outside the boundaries of the ranch as well, visiting one another's homes, sharing resources, and forming friendships that extended into their daily lives. John noticed that their laughter became more frequent, their smiles more genuine, and their sense of hope stronger. The ranch had become a place where challenges were shared and solutions were found collectively. Every act of cooperation, every shared story, and every small accomplishment contributed to a growing feeling of belonging. Evenings on the ranch were especially remarkable. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple, John and the women would gather under the large mesquite tree near the water trough. They shared meals, exchanged stories, and sometimes sang songs from their communities. These moments created bonds that transcended words, fostering trust and mutual respect. John understood that this was the true value of the ranch. More than water, food, or shelter, it had become a place of emotional and social connection, a refuge where people could rebuild their spirits and their confidence. One day, John noticed a small group of young girls among the women. They were shy at first, standing quietly at the edge of the group, observing the older women and John as they worked. John smiled at them and offered to teach them simple tasks, like collecting water or planting seeds. The girls hesitated but eventually joined in. Over time, they began to learn quickly, asking questions and helping others. John felt a sense of joy and pride, knowing that these children were gaining skills and confidence that would serve them throughout their lives. He realized that by nurturing not only the women but also the younger generation, he was helping to create a lasting legacy of self-reliance and cooperation. As the community at the ranch grew, John also became more reflective. He thought about the events that had brought him here, the simple act of offering water to three strangers, and how it had changed his life in ways he could not have anticipated. He realized that kindness had a ripple effect, touching lives far beyond what one could see. Every woman who returned to the ranch, every child who learned a new skill, and every small accomplishment contributed to a growing story of hope, resilience, and community. John felt humbled by this realization, understanding that his actions, though simple, had the power to inspire and transform. The women also began to take initiative in other ways. They organized small projects, such as planting additional vegetables, mending fences, and creating spaces for the children to play safely. They supported one another emotionally, offering encouragement during difficult moments and celebrating successes together. John observed how the community had become self-sustaining in many ways, with the women taking responsibility for both their own well-being and the well-being of others. This sense of empowerment filled John with pride and deep satisfaction. The town nearby also began to notice the positive changes at John's ranch. People spoke of the generosity, respect, and cooperation that had developed there. Some visited to offer help or to learn from the women's example. John welcomed these visitors with openness, sharing what he had learned about kindness, trust, and building community. He emphasized the importance of respect and understanding, and he encouraged everyone to treat one another with compassion. The ranch became known not only as a place of refuge, but also as a center of learning and inspiration for the wider community. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between John and the women grew stronger. They shared not only work and skills but also hopes, dreams, and personal stories. John learned about their families, their pasts, and the challenges they had faced. In turn, he shared stories of his own life, of the ranch, and of the values that had guided him. These exchanges deepened their trust and friendship, creating a sense of mutual respect that became the foundation of the community. One evening, as John watched the sun set behind the distant mountains, he reflected on how far the ranch had come. What had started as a single act of kindness had blossomed into a thriving, supportive community. The women were no longer strangers. They were friends, collaborators, and partners in creating a better life. The ranch had become a place of hope, learning, and empowerment, a testament to the power of compassion and the strength of human connection. John understood that this was the true reward of his efforts, seeing lives transformed, trust restored, and hope renewed. By the end of the day, John felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had discovered that life was not just about survival or work. It was about connection, kindness, and the positive impact one person could have on many lives. The ranch was now more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a school, a meeting place, and a beacon of hope for those who had faced hardship. John knew that challenges would continue to come, but he also knew that together, with trust, respect, and cooperation, they could overcome anything. As night fell and the desert sky filled with stars, John sat quietly on the porch, reflecting on the journey so far. He thought about the 3 women who had come to him first, the 25 who had followed, and the countless others who had been touched by his kindness. He realized that the true impact of his actions could not always be measured. It lived in the trust, joy, and resilience that now flourished at the ranch. John closed his eyes and smiled, knowing that he had found a purpose far greater than he had ever imagined, and that the community he had helped nurture would continue to grow, spreading hope and kindness to all who came after. The seasons on John Harper's ranch had changed. Quietly but significantly since the first day, he had offered water to 3 tired Apache women. Summer's scorching heat had given way to the softer warmth of autumn, and the desert's colors shifted from bright yellows and browns to deep oranges and muted reds. The ranch, once quiet and solitary, had become a place of life, connection, and hope. John had grown accustomed to the constant presence of the women, and in many ways, the ranch had become a community rather than just a home. That morning, John awoke before sunrise as usual. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of fallen leaves and the faint aroma of the desert flowers still clinging to life. He stretched, feeling a sense of anticipation in the calm morning hours. The previous months had shown him the importance of patience, trust, and compassion, but today felt different. There was a sense that something meaningful was about to unfold. As he walked to the water trough to fill it, he noticed that a few women were already gathering near the edge of the ranch. They waved at him with bright smiles, their faces glowing with the warmth of familiarity. Today, the group was larger, and their steps were more confident. Over time, they had grown comfortable with the ranch, with John, and with each other. They no longer moved cautiously or hesitated to speak. Their laughter carried across the open land, a sound that had become a comforting part of John's daily life. John welcomed them warmly. "Good morning. You are all welcome here. Please make yourselves at home." The women approached without hesitation, some carrying small baskets of freshly picked vegetables or herbs, others bringing simple woven items they had crafted. They wanted to contribute, to give back to the ranch that had become their sanctuary. John was deeply touched. He realized that kindness was not just about giving. It was about creating a space where people felt valued, capable, and inspired to help one another. The morning passed in a mixture of work and conversation. Some of the women helped feed the cattle, others tended the garden, and a few worked on repairing fences. John guided them gently, offering tips and encouragement. The women, in turn, shared their own knowledge. One taught John a better method to conserve water in the trough. Another showed him how to make a simple basket from local reeds. And a third shared a traditional recipe for a stew using ingredients from the garden. These moments were small but meaningful, a reminder that learning could go both ways and that collaboration strengthened bonds. As the sun rose higher, the women began sharing their stories again. Some spoke of struggles they had faced since their husbands passed away, while others shared moments of joy and hope that had kept them moving forward. John listened carefully, offering advice when asked and simply providing a patient ear when needed. He understood that listening was sometimes more important than speaking, that showing care and understanding could heal wounds that words alone could not reach. By late morning, a sense of community had fully taken hold on the ranch. The women worked together seamlessly, supporting each other in ways that were both practical and emotional. If one woman needed help carrying water or repairing a fence, another would step in without hesitation. They encouraged each other to take breaks, to rest in the shade, and to enjoy moments of laughter amidst the work. John marveled at the transformation. What had begun as simple acts of generosity had grown into a thriving network of trust, collaboration, and empowerment. Around midday, John suggested a small gathering under the large mesquite tree near the water trough. They shared bread, fruits, and tea, and conversation flowed freely. The women discussed plans for the upcoming weeks, ideas for improving the garden, and ways to make the ranch even more welcoming for anyone who might come seeking help. There was laughter, light-hearted teasing, and a joyful energy that filled the air. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the true impact of his kindness was not measured in food or water, but in the confidence, hope, and resilience that had blossomed in the women who now called his ranch a safe place. In the afternoon, John suggested they take a walk through the property. The desert around the ranch was beautiful in its quiet majesty, and he wanted to share it with the women. They moved along the trails together, observing the cattle, checking fences, and tending the garden. Along the way, John pointed out areas where the land could be improved and asked for their input. The women suggested planting more vegetables, setting aside a small area for children to play safely, and creating a space where they could gather for storytelling or lessons. John welcomed these ideas, realizing that the ranch had become a shared home, shaped not only by him but also by everyone who had invested their time and effort. As evening approached, the sky began to glow with the warm hues of sunset. Shadows stretched across the land, and the temperature cooled to a comfortable level. The women gathered under the mesquite tree once more, enjoying a simple meal and sharing stories of their pasts, their families, and their dreams for the future. John listened intently, feeling honored by the trust they had placed in him. He realized that these moments, small, quiet, and filled with genuine connection, were the true reward of his efforts. The ranch had become a place where people could heal, grow, and find hope in the company of others. Over time, the women began to teach new skills to each other and to the younger girls who had joined the community. They shared lessons in gardening, weaving, cooking, and caring for the animals. John encouraged this learning, understanding that knowledge was one of the most valuable gifts they could offer each other. The younger girls grew more confident with each passing day, their laughter and curiosity adding a vibrant energy to the ranch. John watched with pride as they worked alongside the older women, learning not only practical skills, but also the importance of cooperation, kindness, and community. The town nearby began to take notice of the changes at the ranch. People spoke of the generosity, resilience, and collaboration that had developed there. Some visited to offer help or to learn from the women's example. John welcomed these visitors, sharing the lessons he had learned about compassion, trust, and the ripple effects of kindness. He emphasized the importance of treating everyone with respect and giving them the opportunity to contribute in meaningful ways. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a center of hope, learning, and inspiration for anyone who came seeking guidance. Months passed, and the community on the ranch continued to flourish. The women who had once been strangers now called each other friends, and their sense of trust and belonging had grown stronger with every passing day. John reflected on the journey that had brought them together, the simple act of offering water and bread, and marveled at how far it had come. The ranch had become a place where kindness could grow, where hope could be nurtured, and where people could find the strength to face life's challenges. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, John sat quietly on the porch, watching the women and children gather near the water trough. The laughter, conversation, and sense of community filled the air. John felt a profound sense of fulfillment and gratitude. He realized that his small gestures of kindness had created a lasting impact, not only on the lives of the women, but on the community as a whole. The ranch had become a living example of how compassion, patience, and understanding could change the world, one person at a time. As darkness fell and the stars began to twinkle across the desert sky, John thought about the journey that had brought him here. From offering water to 3 weary strangers to seeing a thriving community of women and children empowered and supported, the transformation was remarkable. He understood that life's true value was found in the connections we create, the trust we build, and the kindness we offer without expecting anything in return. The ranch had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of compassion and the ripple effect of one simple act of generosity. That night, John lay down to sleep with a sense of peace he had never known before. He thought about the future, the women who would continue to return, the children who would grow up with skills, confidence, and hope, and the wider community that would be inspired by their example. He understood that life's challenges would continue, but he also knew that together, with trust, cooperation, and kindness, they could face anything. John Harper had discovered a truth that few people realize, that small acts of compassion could create ripples far beyond what one could imagine. He had learned that offering a hand, a kind word, or a simple gesture could transform lives, inspire hope, and build communities. The ranch, once a solitary home, had become a sanctuary, a school, and a place of friendship, trust, and love. And as John drifted into sleep, he felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that the kindness he had shown to strangers had grown into something lasting and extraordinary, a legacy of hope, compassion, and the enduring power of human connection.